welcome everybody to the Wheels Off Podcast, episode number 4. I am Kay Wheeler, your host, and this is a podcast dedicated to the Simulation Football Association website, also known as SimFBA.com. So in this week's episode, we're going to be talking about a couple different things. We're going to be focusing on spring and preseason week 2 with the Sim College Football and Sim NFL teams, and looking and going into a real deep dive into the strength of schedule, looking at which conferences have the easiest time making it to the playoffs and the Super Bowl this year, and which teams and which conferences are going to have a harder time. And then we're really going to get into strength of schedule on individual teams and look at how things will be playing out. We'll also be taking a look at some of the week by week games that are coming up that are going to be of importance. I'm going to tell you right now, Cincinnati, you got a tough road ahead of you in the middle of the season. Just saying that, just a little bit of a teaser. And then we're going to finally finish up with the AFC West draft grades that I came up with. So before we get going too much further, let's go ahead and get into this. So most of you know, I am a realtor by trade, former principal and school teacher, worked many different things in my 54 years of life here. And one thing I've always talked about, and I really like about my job as a realtor, is the flexibility with my schedule to do things. And that's one of the things that drew me to this simulation, was the ability to have some flexibility in scheduling and understanding how things work, not only from a schedule side, but from a general manager side. And a lot of us get into this simulation because of the general manager type stuff, salary caps, game planning, all that stuff's really cool. I've been playing online sports simulation since 2004, playing with What If Sports. If anybody knows the Gridiron Dynasty, Hardball Dynasty, Hardwood Dynasty, those type of things, those are where I cut my teeth. There's a few of us here that have come over from WIS, What If Sports. Great site, old code though, but these gentlemen, these devs here are really, really working hard to make things go in a much more realistic way, and that's what a lot of us like. I mean, granted, a lot of us could go play Madden really easily on the Xbox or the PS or whatever, or computer, and Madden Ultimate Team, or MUT as it's called, is great. I'm really looking at this simulation becoming something other than just another video game, but actually getting a little bit deeper dive into some stuff. So I'm excited about what's coming up here. But with that, being a realtor, my schedule is really important. Learning to time block, learning to put things in, and learning what specifically needs to come before something else. So as we go through this over the next few weeks, I'll be talking about some different things and bringing some insight and some interviews with some of the devs and leaders at the site to see how things are going to go in the future. Get a little bit more of an exclusive look into some things as we start to develop this podcast. Let's go see what is happening over here. Spring games and preseason. I'm not going to really focus too much on college right now because of spring games. A lot of people are playing their younger players, their recruits, getting them some time, getting some depth, seeing what they've got, testing out new offenses and defenses. I know at Wisconsin, my team, we're making the switch from a pro offense to a spread offense, and from a 4-3 defense to a 3-4 defense. To put it nicely, we're kind of a train wreck this year, and if we win 6 games, I'll be excited. But let's go ahead and take a look. This was last week's games for week 2. Home team did slightly better than week 1. Week 1, we saw 5-11 for the home team. This week we see 6-10, so a little bit better. Scoring averages go up. Week 2, we tend to see a lot more of the starters play. People have to play one starter during the first 3 weeks. We change that. And so we get into this idea of who's playing. Do you put your starters in? Who's going to make the team? And then how do you make your cuts? You're allowed 55 people on roster, 16 on practice squad. I know there's several teams like ourselves that were close to 90 people. So we're cutting a lot of people, cutting 19 players. So we're getting down to there real quickly and figure out who works and who doesn't. I'll tell you right now, I'm seeing a lot of issues in special teams. And that's probably because we're seeing a lot of younger players play on the special teams units. But as you can take a look here, this was week 2 for the Sim NFL preseason. A lot of teams doing well, and weather is starting to be playing a factor too. I know several games outside had high winds and rain. So how did that change game plans? That's something we're going to see this year is game plans and how things go together. Probably my favorite game out of week 2. I really, really, really like the Houston Jets game, and I also like the Detroit Pittsburgh game because Detroit and Pittsburgh. I mean, Pittsburgh was literally 2 series away from being a playoff team last year. 2 series from going from 8-9 to 10-7. Could have really easily been a playoff team and a hard team to beat, especially with their double wing run up first offense and their extremely talented secondary. Tough for anybody in the AFC to go through Pittsburgh. So keep an eye on them. We'll talk about them here in just a little bit too. But go ahead. Let's get into this. Let's talk about strength of schedule. Now, understand we're going to be looking at the easiest and hardest schedules for both conference and teams. And I know last year, first year of the SimFBA NFL season, we had several teams purposely not being competitive, purposely tanking, trying to get good draft picks to increase their stuff. Because the first year's draft was okay. This year's was better. Next year's is going to be even better and further because you're going to start seeing the players from the college teams that the humans have been running and redshirting and playing and developing. Everything start coming up so that the quality is going to go up. So last year, saw several teams. There was 2 distinct philosophies last year: tank and get a good draft pick, or 2, try hard and be known as the first ones to go on. There's a couple of easiest, hardest schedule. Let's go ahead and take a look at the conferences. So what's the bottom? So there's 8 conferences. We're going to look at the bottom 4. And there's a big difference between number 5 and number 4 in win percentage. So with the easiest conference is going to be the NFC West with a 461 win percentage as a conference. Last year we had the Cardinals at 16-1. You had the Rams 12-5, and then we had San Francisco and Seattle. Nothing against Dr. Novella or Tuscan's teams. They took a different tack. They're trying to build a team from the ground up. Totally understand it. Develop an identity. So right now you're going to see, if you're in the AFC West, you probably have a better chance of getting into the playoffs. I'm seeing 2 teams definitely coming from the West. Then NFC South, the counterparts to the Titans side. Last year was the Buccaneers. Heavy run first team. Amazing defense. 12-5 team. And then there was everybody else. I believe the Saints were 8-1. Falcons were 6-10-1, I believe. And then there was Carolina. And then you have the AFC North. Last year, we saw Cincinnati and Cleveland both make the playoffs. Pittsburgh was 8-9. And like I said before, they were 2 series away from being 10-7 and making the playoffs. Last year, ideally, you could have seen 3 AFC North teams go through there. And then we have the AFC East with Buffalo and New England making it last year. Buffalo was a 10-win team, and New England was a 9-8 team. Both really strong, I believe. Patriots are leaning really heavily into the run game. We're seeing that a lot with AFC teams, a lot of heavy run teams. But this year, you're going to see some improvements because I believe the Jets are now finally under human ownership, which is good. Miami's always going to be tough with their air raid offense. And then Buffalo is going to have a solid defense. So get into the top 4. 5th easiest would be the NFC North. Last year, you saw Detroit, 10-win team, make it in, and that was it for them. They're only ones in the NFC North, and they were older defense. J.M. Jacobs does a great job of getting his teams ready to play and to a certain identity, but now he's dealing with some older players, and I think that was on purpose. He wanted to do this knowing that future drafts will be better talent. So he's okay trying to do better the first couple of years and then get the talent later. I expect to see them in again. They do have kind of a tough road ahead at a couple of points this season, but they also get to play, they have Green Bay, they got Chicago, they got a pretty easy schedule with who they play this year coming up. So 3rd toughest schedule. So 6th easiest, 3rd toughest is the AFC South with Jacksonville Jaguars, who were 15-2 last year. Tennessee Titans 12-5. Then Houston and Indianapolis are both rebuilding and retooling themselves. They both took the tact of let's build for the future, where Jacksonville and Tennessee were like, hey, let's see if we can win something right now and get into the playoffs and figure this thing out and then build slightly different. And no, too easy. Your NFC East is not the hardest. You're number 2. And we'll talk about this when we get to individual teams. You had Philadelphia and Washington and the New York Giants all in the playoffs last year. You had a 9-8 Giants, 16-1 for the Commanders, and then I believe it was 10-7. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sagebo, but I think it was 10-7 for the Eagles. And then the Cowboys were 8-9. I mean, they were close. It was just a matter of a series or two if the Cowboys make it in over the Giants. So that leaves us with the AFC West having the hardest schedule this year. Granted, we have the 17-0 Denver Broncos from last year who played in the Super Bowl and came up short to the Washington Commanders. Then you have the Vegas Raiders, who are a 10-7 team, who are very much high-flying on the offense and high-flying defense. And then Kansas City has a human coach this year for the first time, developing what appears to be a very run-first approach and pumps. Los Angeles Chargers, always tough, 8-9. I think he was probably a little underwhelmed by the results from last year. I think he went out and addressed a couple of those this year. I know he was kind of busy with his real world officiating work during the draft, but Pump is always going to be ready and figure out how to work this system so it gets him to where he needs to be. So let's go ahead and look at individual team schedules. These teams have the easiest chance of getting into the playoffs and winning this year because they have the easiest schedule by nature of being probably last or third place in their division, and also depending on who they've got on the other side of their schedule, based upon are they playing what NFC section are they playing. Baltimore, they deserved it. Number 1 pick coming in this year. They traded it out with Seattle getting, which we talked about a couple of episodes ago. And we're looking at them playing the AFC South. We're watching them play the NFC West. So they had a pretty easy job this year. They get San Francisco and Seattle. It's going to be kind of a dogfight between the lower end teams in these two divisions, but we're going to see them getting there. Arizona Cardinals, like I said, NFC West has an easy schedule this year across the conference. 16-1 last year, real easy road this year to getting in to the playoffs again through the NFC West. You're going to see the Cardinals in there, and then you're going to see the Jets. Jets under a new human ownership this year. Very run-first offense. We're going to see how they do. They have a pretty decent schedule. When it comes down to it, they have to travel to Seattle. They have Indianapolis, and they have to go to Indianapolis, and then they get Arizona and San Francisco at home. So they have the ability to do some good things. And then second easiest schedule overall is the Los Angeles Rams. Vivid, you got an easy schedule, dude. So you're playing the AFC North. Other than Cincinnati and Cleveland, you really don't. And Pittsburgh's going to give you trouble because they're very good secondary and good pass rush. We're going to see how that matchup's going to be real interesting between you two. But the team that has the easiest of anything, Pittsburgh Steelers, 8-9 last year, 2 series away from being in the playoffs, and they're rewarded with the easiest schedule. Just by going off last year's totals, I know they're skewed a little bit, but they get Baltimore at home, Atlanta at home, Carolina at home, Buffalo at home, Seattle at home, Houston, Cleveland, New England, Cincinnati, they're all at home. They have to travel to Tampa Bay. And then when they travel to Miami. That's a hit or miss. Who knows? New Orleans, hit or miss. They do have to travel to LA and play the Chargers. That's going to be a tough game for them. So on the flip side, let's look and see who has the hardest schedule to play with this year. And we're going to see when we do the weekly breakdown here in a little bit, you're going to see some of these games are popping up here and why they're so important. So with the 5th hardest schedule is going to be Detroit Lions. 10-7 last year. Jam Jacobs has got a tough team, veteran leadership, added some key pieces on defense. Really excited about what they got. And I think when we get to the NFC North, you're going to see my draft grade on him is pretty high. I liked what he did with his draft, and he's building pieces within his identity and his schemes. So they have the 5th hardest schedule. Fourth hardest is going to be the Las Vegas Raiders, or as they like to say, the Raiders. They play some tough teams at home. They travel to a couple of tough places. You're going to see that a little bit later in the schedule. And they don't really have many weeks off. I understand they play Denver twice. They play Chargers twice. And then, no, they got a tough one, just an absolute tough one this year. And then they play the AFC South on the flip side as well. So they got a tough one going there. And as the AFC West, they played their number one overall conference schedule. They played the number 2 and number 3 this year. So it's going to be tough for anybody in the AFC West. But really, the Raiders have got a tough one. But not as tough as their counterparts, the Los Angeles Chargers. They have the third hardest schedule just by looking at things. Just give me an idea. They play Dallas. They play Pittsburgh at home, Vegas at home. They play at Washington. They play Denver at home. They play Minnesota, the Giants. They play at Philly. They play Jacksonville at home. They play Tennessee at home. And then they end the season at Denver. I mean, you got some tough games coming. Our defending champions, the Washington Commanders, they have the second hardest schedule. Welcome to being number 1. You get to play all the top teams. It's going to be a tough one for the Commanders. They have, think about it, everybody in the NFC East is going to be hard. Everybody was 8 and 9 or above. The NFC East, that's tough. You add in the fact that they also play AFC West. You got the Chargers, the Raiders, the Broncos. It's going to be really interesting to see because I believe it's week 9 that Washington travels to Denver for a rematch of the Super Bowl. So that'll be interesting to watch. Then obviously you always got Philly. Philly is always tough. Sageville and his team is on top of things. But the toughest team, the one with the hardest schedule, is also another NFC East team, and that is going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. Everything I just said about Washington, you get to see happen with Philly, but Philly also gets to play not the Super Bowl runner-up, but also the Super Bowl winner, and he plays them twice. So that's part of the reason why you see them so highly ranked on the strength of schedule. Washington, Chargers, Raiders, Lions. 5 toughest. But here we go. Here's some of the team ones, just so you guys can see. I'll just let this sit up on the screen for just a second. Go ahead and find your team, figure out where you're at. Seattle got the 16th hardest. Seattle, last 3 games, Arizona, Tampa, Arizona. That's tough. They have a tough one right there. 3 of the last 4 games, all playoff teams. So let's go ahead and take a look at this weekly schedule. And I just went ahead and just put down games of interest I thought was interesting. Obviously, week 1, we got the Philly and Rams going at each other. You got Detroit and Jacksonville. You got 4 playoff teams all going right at each other. Week 2, we got Dallas playing at the Chargers. An 8-9 team versus a 9-8 team. Both, I guarantee you, both Rocket Can and Pump thought that their season was an underperformance for what they were expecting. Guarantee it. Almost. And if I'm not, Pump will tell me. Trust me. Rocket Can will have no problem telling me as well. And then as you go through a bit, I want you to notice from week 6 through 13, always add Cincinnati to this list. Week 6, playoff team, 10-7 at Buffalo, 10-17. Home against 12-5 Tampa, playoff team. Home against Arizona, 16-1, playoff team. Home against Pittsburgh, 8-9. Who should have been a playoff team? Just like I said, a couple series, gonna be tough. At Cleveland, 10-7, playoff team. Home against Denver, Super Bowl runner-up, 17-0 regular season. They have a bye week, week 12, and then they get to travel to Jacksonville, a 15-2 team. This 8-week span for the Cincinnati Bengals, 7 games in 8 weeks, all with 6 playoff teams, they are going to be tested. They are either going to be beat up or they're going to be battle ready by the time they hit playoffs. We go through here, ending at the end with week 18 with the Sunday night game. Jacksonville at Tennessee. And yes, Ricky, I'm waiting to play you guys. I got something for you. But watch this. In week 13, Denver versus Dallas. couple depths playing each other. That's always a fun one to watch too. But just some ideas of what's going on out there. And this will be posted for those who are listening. Will be posted on the SimFBA.com website under the NFL threads. So feel free to there will be a link in the description for this, both on SoundCloud, Spotify. Yes, we're going to be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Got that set up finally. Deezer and a couple others. So go ahead and check those out when you get a chance and go to the links. You'll be able to see all this stuff. So here we are. Last week I did AFC West. This week I'm doing AFC West. I'm going to kind of work my way across the country. Obviously, NFC and AFC East will be the last ones I do as we come across. But let's take a look at some of these teams. Let's talk about who had the best drafts. So Denver had 14 picks. It is hard not to see how involved they were with probably the most shocking, I guess would be the best term. Most shocking, maybe shocking is not the right word. Definitely the biggest wow moment when in second round they picked up Eli Abda, the kicker from Arizona State, into the second round. I know everybody had been looking at him. I think most people thought maybe fourth round, but they said, no, what? Kicking's a weak point for us. We're going to take him. I mean, Will Hill, Abda, then picked up the fullback, Craig Crosby out of Buffalo to help add things. A couple of wide receivers, added Jerry Lawson, running back from Oregon in the sixth round, and then a host of, I believe it was 4 different picks in the seventh round. But like I did last time, we're going to talk about their best pick, and now everybody's going to go, yeah, Abda, best pick. He's great. I think it was a stretch at 2, second round. Definitely, probably late third, early fourth. I could see stretch at 2. My best pick for them was actually the receiver Eric Graham from Arizona State. Now, let me show you why. Remember, Arizona State is an AI-controlled team. So that's part of my reasoning behind this. So he's a route runner from Arizona State, 5'9", 176, so a little bit on the smaller side. I would be concerned about him working the middle. But this gentleman had 47 catches on an AI-controlled team, had a 68% catch rate, put up almost 900 yards and 8 touchdowns. When you get to his combine rankings, 4.38, 40, that's 11th out of all receivers. 4.38 is still fast. Okay, he's still going to be able to do this. He's fairly strong with 24 reps. Extremely good route runner with a 9.16 route running rating. Put him 10th over all all wide receivers, and then a really good catch rating at 7.15. I mean, that would be nice to see that a little bit better, but this is a kid that would have produced on a Sim AI team. I'm not sure Tuscan can probably help answer how they were designed. The whole offense did not go through him, but when he did get the ball, he made things happen. So I think this is a sleeper pick. I think it's better than their Stauffer pick. I had Graham rated higher than Stauffer, but I think that this is a great pick for Denver. Now we got the Kansas City Chiefs under new coach JW 1952 TX. Great job building an identity from an AI team. Put it nicely, it's a tough rebuild for him. He's picking an identity offensive and defensively. He put that into the first round, picking 2 times. Trading up with, I believe it was Minnesota. Is it Minnesota or Buffalo? No, Buffalo. To get the 27 pick and pick up Theo Scribner, quarterback out of Western Michigan, to pair along with Noah Prater, the center from Tennessee. Everything that he did, was based on speed, whether it's linebackers, whether it's receivers, whether it's running backs. It's all speed related. I love the Fernando Blue pick, the running back from Michigan in the 7th round. I know a lot of teams are eyeing him. I mean, he can somebody could play on special teams, return punts, return kicks, spell running backs, be a third down back. Great pick up there. And the way I'm talking about, you would think he's my best pick, but he's not. I think Michael Garrett, the outside linebacker from Syracuse, is probably one of the more underrated outside linebackers in the game that we're going to see this next year. So Garrett is a speed-based linebacker. Like every other pick that Kansas City did was a speed base. A 4.35 shuttle, and in the 40, first overall for outside linebackers, had a 3.89 shuttle, so good lateral movement, great run stop, and great coverage skills, both in the the low 7.15 run stop, 7.19 coverage. This is a kid that had 62 and a half tackles. I believe Syracuse was also an AI team. Correct me if I'm wrong. 18 tackles for loss. So he plays on the other side of the line the majority of the time. Yes, I would like to see if more than a half a sack for this kid being an outside linebacker, or more tackles for loss if he's a strong side outside linebacker, like run stopper type, but did have an interception, so that kind of sets him off. My biggest concern is going to be the fact he's 6'1", 219. Is he going to be able to handle that edge? And especially with some of the tackles that we got and power running backs you're going to see in the AFC, is he going to be able to set the edge? Only time will tell. Moving on to the Chargers, I know Pump had real world responsibilities. I know he does a lot of things in officiating and through his work. So he traded some of his lower picks out so he could focus on that. But when he did pick up 3 very, very solid pieces that help his team hopefully go from 9-8 to hopefully maybe 11-6. I could see that. But they do have a tough schedule. So 9-8 is probably where they're going to be. 11-6 is not out of reach. Picking up Valera and Jones and Altavia, great pickups, and all of them are going to be very helpful. My best pick for them is going to be Javier Valera, the offensive tackle from Houston. I know I messed it up, guys. It's okay. Really good. Great shuttle time. So he's got good lateral movement. He can play the left side. He's got a great shuttle time, so can really good quick hips. Do this. Is extremely strong, but he's also extremely smart. 32 Wonderlic. Now, understand the average Wonderlic score through all players in the draft was a 23, and he's considerably higher than that. First overall for offensive tackles. Definitely ahead of some of the guys we saw last week with Dunn, comes to mind from Oklahoma. Great run blocking, and being a balanced offensive tackle, he can kind of do a little bit of everything. I can see the Chargers putting a little bit more emphasis on the run. I know they have a scrambler quarterback, so maybe that's what they're looking at. But a great pickup for this kid, 6'3", he's 294. He's not going to move, and he's got great feet and long arms. So it's going to be real interesting to see how Pump uses him. And we'll get to the Las Vegas Raiders. I like what they did with their draft. You're going to see in my draft grades. I really like what they did. A lot of these people they chose here, I had on our Titans draft board. I knew what they did and where they went. From Brett Zunino from Nevada all the way through Adoree Jackson from Boise State to Tony Edmonds. They're focusing on being fast. They're both on offense and on defense. They're focused on being aggressive, and they had some great picks. Just absolutely great picks. And Garrison Hose, the first defensive end from LSU, a lot of people would talk about him. I know defensive tackles was the big thing, but you know what, this kid could play inside if he had to, but he's not my favorite pick of theirs, and that would have to be Brett Zunino, the inside linebacker from the University of Nevada, Reno. So here's a kid that's got a 5.47 40 for an inside linebacker. So he's got some speed to close grounds. He can cover tight ends if he needs to. He's got a 4.0 on the shuttle, great lateral quickness. He's fairly strong with 33 reps on the bench press, but he's extremely smart. 39 Wonderlic from the University of Nevada. I think somebody's misplaced. I think somebody may have cheated for him, or he's just really smart and came into his own in college. I don't know. Great run stopper, even better at coverage, has a 6.96 run stop, which I found pretty good really good for an inside linebacker, 5th best. Obviously, we'll talk about some of the liabilities here in just a moment. Great coverage, the 7.4, but he had 70.5 tackles, 29 tackles for loss. He plays on the other side of the line of scrimmage, 2.5 sacks and a recovered fumble. This is a playmaker. My concern was Zunino, and I think a lot of other people saw the same thing. He's only 6 foot. He's 222 pounds. And the question is he going to be durable enough to stay inside against some of these running backs we're going to see in the AFC? or even from Washington's got 2 great running backs. Can he handle these type of people? That is going to be the biggest concern about Zunino. But overall, I like that pick. It's a great pick for the Raiders. It matches what they're trying to do and what their style is. So let's go ahead and give them the grades. With 14 picks, it's not hard to do well. I know Alex is like, don't give me an F, don't give me an incomplete. I'm not. I thought you had a really good draft from top to bottom. I like how all your picks were value picks at each of the rounds. Other than Abda going in the second round, which I had late third, early fourth, that's the only stretch. So the Broncos get a B. The Chiefs, first year coach, establish an identity, a lot of speed on the field, trying to fix holes through free agency, then addressing even more through the draft. I thought Kansas City did a great job. I gave them an A-, B+, kind of that range. It could go either way depending on how Scribner and Prater do specifically. And then Garrett, if he can handle, if they're going to move him to strong safety, if they're going to move him inside, I don't know. But those are the question marks. That's the only reason I didn't give him a little bit higher. I liked the Chiefs' grade and I liked their draft. I thought JW did a great job addressing several needs there. And then Puff, even though he only had 3 picks, I think they're all very solid picks. Yes, I know the other LA team I gave an incomplete because they only had 1 pick. 3 was a little bit easier to pick. I thought they were all great value. Overall, I think they're going to help out. My concern is the fact I believe Pump put a lot of picks into the offensive line last year, and the first pick was an offensive line this year. So are they going to gel together this year or next? That's going to be the big question. This could easily move from a B to a C+ or to an A, depending on how things go this season with the development of last year's offensive line and the picks that they had this year. And that brings us up to the Raiders. Las Vegas, I gave you a B+. I liked your draft. I don't think they're quite as good as Kansas City's. I mean, but overall, it fits who you are. You play fast, your balls to the wall, offense and defense, you blitz, you throw the ball. I liked your draft overall. I think it's one of the strongest drafts we had. Some others are going to probably say, no, I don't think so, but I liked your draft. And then obviously, you guys get a chance to go check out Design, the gentleman who did this helmet. I borrowed this from his site. I've reached out to him to talk to him about doing some custom work for my teams. Get a chance to go check out his stuff. Designs, Dubaya Designs. Go look him up. Go find some stuff. He's got some really interesting work. So there we go for episode 4. I'm sorry I did not cover basketball this episode. I'm going to be doing that next week because we just had the draft lottery, I believe, yesterday. We have free agency coming up. I know contract extensions are going through and there's some adjustments. We talked about the interface last week. We'll get into the SimFBA next week, and as we review some things and get into the NFC North teams for the draft grade. So we'll get a chance to look at those teams as well. Once again, if you liked what you heard, you're interested in the Simulation Football Association, go check us out at simfba.com. The link will be in the description below, along with a link to our Discord where you can come talk to us and chat with us and see how the games go. Once again, if you found something exciting or interesting, go ahead and share this with a friend and invite them to come listen to the podcast. But this is Kay Wheeler. Have a good time, and we'll see you next Friday for episode 5.
That's all, folks.